When it comes to the Sonic Prime TV show, there's a lot of talk among Sonic fans around which characters are done right, are faithful to the overall beats of their character across all media, especially their game depictions. More often than not, it's Sonic that comes under the most scrutiny here, which makes sense. He's the main character, and he's also quite a bit different than he is in the games. There's a lot to unpack here when it comes to Sonic, so naturally he dominates a lot of the discussion around characterization in this show. But now that Season 2 has hit, as a longtime fan of Shadow the Hedgehog and advocate for him returning to how he was at his best, I have now been sufficiently distracted from my dissection of Sonic, and am now laser focused on a different hedgehog. No, not that one. That whole thing needs its own video. Basically, with Shadow now having a bigger part in the show after being pretty much absent throughout Season 1, I have to cover it. It's a condition under the Shadow fan club bylaws, and to not do so could see my membership revoked. Took me way too long to reach the Maria tier to allow that to happen. As I said before, Shadow has always been a very important character to me. Through the highs of his adventure arc, his new lease on life during the Dark Era, and unfortunately his total train crash outside Diarrheaville, better known as his Boom and Meta Era depictions. For Shadow's characterization, these games were like the shit that just won't wipe. With each new game, you go back hoping that this time the tissue will be clean and we'll get a good Shadow again, but nope, just more shit. So now whenever we're lucky enough to actually get Shadow in anything, I'm always very eager to see which Shadow we get. I'm waiting nervously to see how the third movie goes, and I was the same about Sonic Prime. Season 1 didn't have enough Shadow for me to make a call either way, but with Season 2, I think I now have enough to go on. If there's one thing that's immediately apparent about Shadow in this show, it's that he is seriously skeptical of Sonic. Dude doesn't trust him at all, and it really gives Shadow this jaded, antisocial vibe. He is so tired of Sonic's shit in this show, yet they never really have him interact with anyone else. So for the most part, this is the only side of his character we get to see. It was a concern I had back in Season 1, when the only real moments we seen of Shadow was him fighting with Sonic, or yelling at him through space and time like an angry Yoda. Season 2 picks up the same way, with Shadow blaming Sonic for the destruction of their home and proceeding to attack him. For me, this is quite jarring, especially compared to Shadow's game persona, when he was done well. Shadow went on to become the more reasoned and considered voice in the room. Rather than wasting time arguing, he'd usually just try and figure a way out of the situation. He had faith in Sonic in the games.
Certainly, it might have been possible if he was still alive.
He may not have been buddy-buddy with him all the time, making hair appointments together to get their quills permed, but he did have a great deal of respect for him. And I don't think he ever really doubted that Sonic would do the right thing. But see, the problem is, I kinda have to give this version of Shadow a pass on all of that. In Prime, Shadow already knows Sonic. We don't even know if the events of Sonic Adventure 2 happened in Prime's universe, so their introduction and subsequent rivalry happened off screen. We just don't know any of the details. And Sonic in this show is no game Sonic. I'd liken him a lot more to movie Sonic, maybe just a little further along in his growth arc. He's super chill and carefree, but he constantly crosses the line of recklessness and sometimes even ventures as far as stupidity.
Don't.
I wasn't going to touch it. I was just pointing at it to tell you not to touch it.
That makes it pretty much impossible to keep the dynamic that these two had in the games. If it's not the same Sonic, then it can't really be the same Shadow. And the more I listen to Sonic in this series, the more I get Shadow's lack of patience with him. Even after all the damage he's done, he doesn't really display any outward remorse, except when he's confronted directly with the fallout of his actions. And this seems to really piss Shadow off. It's not until he actually sees Sonic's regret and that he actually takes responsibility for what happened that Shadow finally relents and tells Sonic his plan. He describes Ghost Green Hill as a place designed to torture them, haunted by ghostly projections from their past to remind them of what they've lost. And like your typical video game objective, the Paradox Prism's shell is here, waiting for all its pieces to be returned. Shadow figures that once the prism is back together, that their home might be restored. Sonic is obviously on board with this, but Shadow tells him that his turn is done. As far as he's concerned, Sonic screwed up enough and it's now up to him to fix this mess. Cue another fight where Shadow is trying to steal Sonic's tech so that he can enter other Shadowverses. One thing I've noticed is that in Prime's universe, Shadow seems to be far stronger than Sonic. He beats him and takes his glove and shoe tech easily, up to and including surfing on his back and riding him like Seabiscuit through Green Hill. But of course, Sonic is the f***ing chosen one or something and they just zippity-zoop back to him, probably since he's the one who broke the prism and absorbed its energy. Even when Shadow does eventually manage taking Sonic's tech, it isn't enough to allow him to travel between the Shadowverses. Frustrated that it's not the tech that gets someone through the portals, it's just Sonic himself. Even though the Shadow Drive allows others to do it, Shadow reluctantly agrees to team up with Sonic. After episode 1, Sonic and Shadow split up, which is weird seeing as they just said they'd work together, but even with Sonic, Shadow can't travel between worlds. Even though Dredd gets through holding onto the Chaos Council ship, it isn't until episode 4 that Shadow finally gets some screen time. We see him attack the Egg Council's ship in the void. Resourceful as ever, he launches debris into the ship to disable it, buying Sonic time to get the Nowhere Shard and taking out the repair bots like a badass in a kind of monster movie style ambush. If there's one thing this show excels at, it's definitely making Shadow look like a badass. He just doesn't get enough time to showcase his personality in my view. I always kind of thought, well, realistically it was more of a hope than a thought, that there might be something special about Shadow in this story. He's the only character besides Sonic who never gets an alternate universe equivalent. You figure Sonic probably doesn't because he caused this whole mess, but Shadow never gets an explanation. There was so much they could have done with that if they wanted to, and it just seems like a wasted opportunity. Hey, maybe in season 3, but for now, he just spends a lot of his time sitting out in the void, a mere observer. That's exactly what I hated most about the supporting cast appearances in the meta era, and I'd really hate to think they used Shadow here just to get butts in seats. They could easily have big plans for Shadow in season 3, but right now, it's just hard to see how. I should probably make it clear I'm not trying to say this version of Shadow is all bad. In fact, it's quite the opposite. There's actually a lot I like about him. His sense of humor is on the darker side, and his wittiness is very much my kind of thing. Agreeing with Sonic when he's talking to his own after images that he's dumber than he looks, and jesting after he saves Sonic's life that he'll probably regret it. There are constantly these teases that Shadow is capable of having a good rapport with others. It's just always very fleeting. He also keeps his cool under pressure during combat. With anyone who isn't Sonic, that is. He's fearless, selfless, and relentless, insisting on taking on both a powered-up Dr. Deep and Dr. Baby? As I said, this show has no problems with showcasing the badass side of his character, although he did kinda have his lunch stolen by a prism-powered Sonic. It would have been nice to get to see Shadow beat those guys himself. He's also clever and a good judge of character. He immediately mistrusts 9 and can see that his goal doesn't align with theirs. He tries to warn Sonic, but of course Sonic doesn't listen, and 9 escapes with all the shards, ending the season with Shadow once again extremely frustrated with Sonic. No doubt about to start season 3 with them fighting again. I think when it comes to Shadow's portrayal in Prime, it's fair to say that it's a bit of a mixed bag. With no Maria, no Team Dark, no backstory at all, his introduction to the rest of the cast is basically left entirely to your imagination, which means his dynamic with anyone could be anything. Sonic jokingly mentions at one point that Shadow has no friends, and besides being an oddly dickish thing for Sonic to say, even as a joke, we're then forced to ask ourselves what exactly ties Shadow to anything in this universe? What's his motivation? As I said, no Maria, no Team Dark. That pretty much leaves him where he was in the Boom series or during the Meta era. There's no scenes of him hanging out with the gang like we got for everyone else. Instead, we just get this broody, grumbling, eye-rolling mass of disapproval. It's not really what I think of when I think of Shadow the Hedgehog, but it is what I think of when I think of him in his own spin-off game or in the IDW comics or in Forces, and maybe that's what they were going for here. His dynamic with Sonic is just wild, but I definitely get the impression Sonic is on a personal growth arc here, and maybe when he's done with that in Season 3, things will improve. But I can't be the only one tired of seeing these two fighting being rehashed. If Prime Shadow is supposed to be post-Maria and post-Team Dark, I'd have much preferred his demeanor be more like he was in Sonic 06. A well-rounded guy who's been through it all and just wants to get shit done, and also knew how to behave around other people. As I said before though, I kinda have to give this Shadow a pass on a lot of this, because practically nothing about the Prime universe is the same as the games, so it's probably only natural that Shadow is different. The whole idea of this show is likely to attract new fans to the series, not appease old schoolers like me who like how things used to be. And he wasn't all bad either. While not quite like any single past Shadow VA, I enjoyed Ian Hanlon's take on the character, especially the more calm and soft-spoken dialogue. To my ear, it sounded like a mixture between Jason Griffith and Kirk Thornton, with the Batman vibes from Kirk toned all the way down. There were glimpses of Shadow at his best at moments throughout the show, and on balance, I'm pretty happy overall with his characterization. It could have very easily been a lot worse, and Season 3 could fill in a lot of the holes. We'll just have to wait and see. There's a lot of promise here, it just depends on how they choose to use him going forward. But what did you guys think? Did you enjoy the writing behind Shadow and his overall characterization? What worked for you and what didn't? And what would you like to see happen with him in Season 3? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and make sure to hit that bell. Surf on that bell like Shadow did with Sonic. Make it suffer. You can also join the channel Discord, follow me on Twitter, and you can support my work on Patreon by buying me a coffee or with a super thanks right here on YouTube. All of your support is much appreciated and goes a long way with helping me keep creating. Plus, if you're a patron, you get to see your name in the video credits like these awesome people. All those links are in the description, so be sure to check them out if you can. But for now, a big thank you for watching. And as always guys, take care.